What is up, guys? Hfmasters here, and today I have a more serious comparison between the Junior's Legacy Fire Dragon and the original one. The reason I did this is because I kind of did do a comparison in that basically video, but that wasn't like a real comparison. That was kind of like an over-exaggerated, less serious, the Junior said, it's not the same as this kind of thing. So this is a more serious version for people that want to see that, because I think this set actually does a pretty solid job at emulating this, for what it is. Obviously the set is, it's a Junior set, so it is kind of significantly worse, but the designer does deserve a lot of credit for being able to actually capture a lot of this in such a simplified, easier kind of way of doing it. So let's go ahead and take a look at what I mean. So the first and most obvious thing, which I did kind of cover in that other video, is the head. Now the head, I already said, I think this is really, really good, and I actually think it's better than the original in just the way it's molded and designed. As I said, when you look at this from a front angle, you can see that the new head mold is curved, so you can actually look at the eyes, while the old one is very, very kind of flat, and it just doesn't look right. You can't see anything other than like the snout and I guess the little ball. It doesn't look right. So I do think the new one looks better in that regard, although I do got to give nods to the old one, because I think these old heads are significantly better looking just in terms of colors. You see on this one they brought in this yellow and then they kind of print this red paint over it, and I think that's a really cool idea, and it kind of fits with the whole elemental theme. They do that with all of the actual original dragons. This one they kind of tried a little bit on the side to put it in, and I don't know how far you can go with Juniors as far as detailing and prints. I imagine that there might be some constraints, but printing isn't something you have to build, so you could go pretty far like this. I think this is just a really nice detailed, and it's pretty simple. It's a good emulation, but it's not as good. But overall, I actually do think that this new head is better. A thing to note is that these original heads all had this function with the ball here. So what you would do is you would grab the head like this, and then you would squeeze it, and the ball would shoot out. This is kind of old, so it's hard to do. There you go. See, the ball shoots out. Obviously, over time, it's not as easy to do. This one does not, but the way it's built is just like the original Golden Dragon from just a year back. So you could put a stud shooter inside of this, and it would be able to emulate that. You would squeeze the head, kind of like this, and you would press it down, and it would shoot off a stud if you had a stud shooter in there. Obviously, you don't, because I guess Juniors doesn't allow that, but that's something worth noting. Another thing that I actually found pretty interesting is that the shaping of just the torso in general is actually really similar to the original one. You look at the original one, it's got this kind of almost boatish-like shape because they use these giant curved pieces that go on both sides. And then you look at the Juniors one, and even though it's one piece, it looks very, very similar. That's just something cool that I think they actually managed to capture in such a simplified version. It's kind of cool that they got that in, but nothing too important. Also, a thing to note is the legs. Obviously, the legs on the original one are significantly better. They're much more detailed, but I do think that these dinosaur legs, even though they're kind of funny, they're just these one-piece things, but I think they capture it pretty well for the most part, even though obviously it's not what you want to see, but it is a Junior set, so there's only so much they can do. Also, other things quickly to note here is that the torso here is much more detailed, although it is pretty simplified. The only thing really I'd say that is significantly missing is this flag. The Junior set just doesn't have anything like that, but for the most part I think they tried. Also, the saddle portion is moved way far up, so the neck is actually like outrageously long. If you look at the original one, the neck's like actually longer than the torso section because it's meant to sit in the actual fire temple, so you can argue that's inaccurate, but I think for the most part they did a pretty decent job there. Now, as far as wings go, there's really no comparison here. These wings are what you see is what you get. You articulate them all around, and that's it. That's pretty much all they do. These ones, however, on the original are a lot more different. So first off, you've got hands to grab minifigures that are not present there. There's obviously these spike details that aren't present, and most importantly, you can fold them, which is something cool that I actually kind of wish they would do in more dragons. Is something they kind of dropped, but I think that was a cool aspect of these ones. That's something you can't do there. And then also articulation on this one is pretty good. You could argue that this one's better just because it's on a ball joint and this is on a ratcheted one, so it is inherently a little bit more restricted, but they're pretty much equal. And then one last thing here is just the tail, which is, again, pretty pathetic on this Junior set. You can't do anything. It moves up and down. This part is movable. That's pretty much it. This is the only part that I don't really understand why they didn't do more with, because I really feel like they could have, even at the junior scale, I mean, like getting this little flame tip in, I think they probably could have done that. I assume they could have done that because they could put the flame for the breath there, so it's the same assembly. But whatever, they didn't really do anything there. So this one, you can rotate it, which you cannot do on the juniors one. It has all these independently movable things, and then there's a flame tip on the end, which is also rotatable. This one is just significantly better in every way. So there you have it. That's the two fire dragons. They actually are significantly more alike than you would expect. This one, I really think if this was a system set, a non-junior set, like the Golden Dragon, I think this dragon would have been really, really good. But because it's on the junior scale, it is significantly hindered by the fact that it has to be super simplified. But the pieces here are pretty much perfect. Everything here, it's that one step away. It's that one little bit of more kind of complicity that it needed, because just that extra bit of freedom in designing it to make things a little more detailed and a little bit more complicated would have been enough to propel this onto the same level as this one, because this dragon really, it's not that good, like honestly, because this is the worst of the original dragons, I say, as far as a build, because it's forced to accommodate the fire temple, so things get off here. Like, you look at these legs, there's no ankle articulation. This is the only dragon that doesn't have that, so it's pretty much constrained to one single pose, because you can only move it so far, and then the legs just aren't gonna, like the feet aren't gonna be able to touch the ground anymore, and it'll just fall over. The proportions on this, as I mentioned, the head and the neck area is longer than the entire torso. That's just not right. That's not how it normally would be, but it has to be that way because the dragon's head needs to go in the temple. So there's things about this one that aren't that great, but it's, you know, it's still better than this. This is still, especially for its time, this is actually a really nice dragon, I think, especially, you know, as a side build. I think it looks really good for the most part. Like, these little things, you know, the way they have it, like the proportions being odd, they don't bother me because the wings are kind of just so big that they kind of fit in. They aren't awkward looking, so it still works out, but this is better than you would have expected. It is, as I said, you know, it's limited, but I do think it does deserve some credit for actually being able to do a lot of things really well for the most part, especially at that junior scale. But yeah, that's pretty much it for the comparison. Thank you guys for watching. Till next time, see you guys later.